The Nintendo Wii is renowned for many iconic games and is synonymous with many different franchises. However, what I was not aware of is that there are in fact quite a few Transformers games for the Wii. 5 to be precise. Today we're going to go through those in release order, look at what makes them good, what makes them bad, and just discuss them in general. Now before we go any further, if you are a fan of movie tie-in games, Transformers, nostalgia, now's the perfect time for you to subscribe. No, seriously, subscribe. So first up we have Transformers the Game, which is the tie-in for the original Michael Bay movie. This version of the game, as well as all its other home console ports, was developed by Traveller's Tales, as in the LEGO game guys. It launched in June 2007 in America and in July 2007 here in Europe. Now really, for those of you who are fans of this series, this game probably needs no introduction because it's basically the same as the other versions but on the Wii. The only major difference being that there are now forced motion controls. Literally every time I make a video about a Wii port of a game, the first thing I'm going to moan about is forced motion controls. I get it for some aspects, like aiming the gun using the Wii remote to point makes a lot of sense, but having to shake the Wii remote like an absolute psychopath when doing melee combat is just ridiculous. Anyway, so in terms of story, this game features a split campaign where you can either join the Autobots or the Decepticons, and much like the film, they are looking for the Allspark. The game itself, for the most part, is a semi-kind of open-world third-person action shooter with a mission format. And one massive win for me is there are collectibles which unlock trailers, production photos, and different colour schemes for different characters. It's pretty cool, to be fair. To be honest, the combat itself is nothing worth writing home about, but it's still pretty decent for the time. You typically have 5 different attack types, including a light weapon, a heavy weapon, a melee attack, which as I mentioned previously is achieved by waving the remote about, and then you can throw objects and use big objects like lampposts as a melee weapon as well. In terms of graphics, this one looked better than the PS2 version, as it should, but it was a lower resolution compared to the other versions of the game. Now, to be honest, critically, every single version of this game, except maybe the DS ports, did do very badly. The Wii version specifically has a 53 out of 100 on Metacritic, with that one actually being higher than the 360 port and higher than the PSP as well. But a lot of critics cited the motion control problems, as well as the other issues that are in the other versions of the game, so like camera controls and just really clunky combat, as being major issues that really tie this game down. Now, I actually own the PS2 version of this game, and I remember having fun with it back in the day, but going back to it quite recently, it is just a massive bland fest of nothing. It's just painfully average. And to be honest, I will apply that to the Wii version as well. It's harmless really, it's just not the best game you could probably pick up on the console. If you like Transformers and you specifically like that Michael Bay movie, you'll probably like this game. Okay, so next up we have Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. This particular version was developed by Chrome Studios, who also handled the PS2 version, which for some reason was released. God knows why, this was 2009. Anyway, yes, this game launched everywhere across June in 2009. Now, the base version of the game on PS3, 360 and PC was very similar to the original. You had 2 separate campaigns, fairly similar combat style and objectives, and this one actually had multiplayer as well. However, the PS2 and Wii version is where this all starts to decline. This version of the game turned it into a kind of third-person platformer, brawler kind of thing. It actually had some better features, including a camera that actually worked that you didn't have to control. Shooting was still with the remote by aiming, you controlled with the nunchuck. But unfortunately, again, if you want to do melee attacks, you're still pressing buttons along with frantically swiping your Wii remote around. If you like that kind of thing and that helps with your immersion, that's completely cool. So that might be good for some players, but for me, I just find it incredibly irritating. However, debates on that aside, the biggest crime of this game is removing the Transformers' ability to transform at will. You can only do it as an ability that defeats enemies around you. You can't actually just transform and drive anymore. That's just gone completely. There are a couple of exceptions to this, however. There are a couple of on-rail moments where you can transform at will. Although, to be honest, these sections don't really add anything to the game. They are kind of dull. On top of this, there's also a really half-baked co-op feature for the main story in which the other player can act as a shield or a special weapon, which is just completely ridiculous. However, there is a co-op arena mode, which is a survival mode where you fight increasingly more difficult waves of enemies, which I kind of like those things in my games. That's pretty cool. Graphically, the game looks fine enough, there's nothing wrong with it, there's definitely better looking games on the Wii, but it's not a problem really. Anyway, again, the Transformers Revenge of the Fallen Wii game has a Metacritic score of around 50, it has 53, which is still not great at all. There are a few more positive reviews, and these are definitely from firms where the reviewers enjoyed the motion control combat, and that's completely fine as I said, but most firms deemed this game to be very repetitive, boring, and just poorly presented. Some going as far to say as it was unfinished. Now, I actually owned the 360 port of this game back in the day, and again, it's harmless really, it's just a nothing game. It's cool to pass a couple of hours, get your 1000 gamer score from the achievements from it, and just move on. And to be honest, the same argument can be made for this Wii version. I didn't mind it, it's harmless really, but it is just boring, and you'll be done with it in a few hours. Okay, so next up we have quite an interesting one. This is the only Wii exclusive Transformers game there is, and I had quite high hopes going into this as it is a tie-in to the War for Cybertron game. And oh boy was I bitterly disappointed. There was definitely a reason that I had no idea this existed prior to making this video, and that is because this game is just boring. It is rubbish and it's boring. Allow me to introduce to you Transformers Cybertron Adventures, a game released in June 2010 across the world and was developed by Next Level Games, who have a very mixed development history. They have some good games in their back catalogue, including the original Super Mario Strikers for GameCube and its sequel on Wii. They also developed the Wii comeback of Punch-Out!, but then they've also developed this, the Captain America game for 360, Spider-Man Friend or Foe. Like, it's a very mixed bag of stuff going on. In fact, they're actually still developing stuff for Nintendo now, with the fantastic Luigi's Mansion 3 and the newest Mario Strikers that came out a couple of years ago. So the base version of Transformers War for Cybertron is a third-person shooter with 2 separate campaigns, both which being fantastic. This game is a on-the-rails shooter, similar to the Time Crisis franchise, and it's just boring. If I wanted to do that kind of thing, I'd go to an arcade. So yeah, you just point and aim with the Wii remote and shoot, and once you've defeated all the enemies in that area, your character will just move on by itself, and then you start shooting again. There are a few small sections where the character will transform, and you as the player have to control them, but it's very, very limited, and it doesn't really do anything to add to the game whatsoever. The only good thing I can really say about this game is that there is a co-op mode, and there is a good score system, with combos not only increasing the score, but will increase the strength of your weapons whilst you're using them. So that's kind of cool, I guess. It's just a shame that the rest of the game is just really boring. I don't understand how they managed to turn Transformers War for Cybertron into a really, really, really depressing game, but they managed it. The single saving grace of this entire game is Peter Cullen voicing Optimus Prime, because everything else about it is just miserable. Rubbish textures, poor quality animations, the environments all look the same and are dull. The gameplay experience itself is just boring, and the only time you're going to have fun is if you play it in co-op with a friend and you both approach it knowing it's going to be bad. The Metacritic score for this game is 41 out of 100, with literally just one actual positive review, a bunch of average ones, and quite a lot of negative ones. There's one review firm that gave it a 16 out of 100, and the caption is, "You'd have more fun if you asked a professional wrestler to try to transform your skeleton into the shape of a moped." And you know what, that perfectly sums up this game. So next we're going from bad to somehow even worse. This is Transformers Dark of the Moon Stealth Force Edition. Now, if you saw my Transformers 3DS video, you will remember that I spoke about this game here, as it's the exact same as the Wii version. Every version of the Dark of the Moon video game that I've played so far has been a buggy, boring mess. The DS version is just naff, the 3DS version was even more rubbish, and to be honest, this is exactly the same as the 3DS version, except it actually looks worse. This game is actually a prequel to the main film, which I guess is kind of cool, but to be honest with you, the best thing you could do for yourself is read the plot and then watch the film, because it's way better than actually playing the game. The new Stealth Force mode basically turns this into a vehicle combat game with basically no actual transforming. You're basically either a vehicle or a slightly slower vehicle with guns, and that's it. The entire Stealth Force thing was just made to sell toys, let's be honest. Anyway, this game just looks ugly, it has a really bizarre control scheme. Again, the fact that the Transformers game takes away transforming just ruins half the fun. I will say one nice thing is the 3DS version is somehow marginally better than this absolute mess. The Metascore for this game is 34 out of 100, which is by far the lowest review score for any Transformers Wii game. In fact, it was a little bit higher than the 3DS's Metascore, but I will definitely stand by the fact that the 3DS port was better. Now, personally, I normally disagree with a lot of what IGN has to say, but here's the caption from their review for the Dark of the Moon Wii game. It is remarkable in its ability to make 5 minutes seem like 5 hours. Pickings might be slim on both the Wii and 3DS this summer, but Transformers Stealth Force Edition isn't a diversion, it's abuse. Anyway, this game released in June 2011, and the Wii port was developed by Behaviour Interactive. Now, these guys are pretty famous for a variety of different tie-in games, but they also made the iconic Doritos Crash Course series and went on to develop Dead by Daylight. Anyway, do yourself a favour, just don't ever play this game. It's such a waste of time. It's not even so bad it's good, it's just so bad it's boring. So finally, we have Transformers Prime the game, which again is another game I've discussed a couple of times in my previous Transformers videos. This was developed by Now Production and released on this console in October 2012 or November if you're in Europe, and eventually 1 month later came to the Wii U as well. Now, this game is on the DS, the 3DS, the Wii, and the Wii U, and all versions of the game are basically identical, even if the DS version is slightly more dumbed down than the other versions of the game. It is primarily a third-person brawler/shooter, and also features some very cool driving sequences. It's a tie-in to the TV show of the same name. The plot sees the Autobots and their human companions facing off against the Decepticons who are trying to free an ancient Transformer known as Thunderwing. Honestly, I've enjoyed playing all 3 versions of this game that I have played so far, and a pretty solid argument could be made to say that this is by far the best Transformers game on the Wii. However, again, the exact issues that pull down all the other Transformers games also affect this one. You have to shake the Wii Remote up and down to do any melee combat, and there's no classic controller support. Bearing in mind this game came out quite late into the Wii's lifespan, because it had already launched on the 3DS and came out on the Wii U a month later. It just seems a bit bizarre to me to not add any other type of controller support into a game on a dying console that had so many different kinds of controllers outside of the Wii Remote. But aside from the dodgy melee, everything else about this game is exactly the same as it is on every other platform, which is a good thing. It's basic, it's simple, but it works. And honestly, the Transformers games on Wii needed that, because all the other games are just broken, buggy messes or really bizarre gameplay choices like on-rail shooters. Anyway, the Metascore for this game is a nice 66 out of 100, which I think is actually the highest for any Transformers game on Wii. It's still not amazing, and the 3DS port of this game got a higher score of 72. But, you know, it's not bad. But that takes us to the end of our look at Transformers video games for the Nintendo Wii today. Do you have a favourite of these, or did you actually play any of them? If so, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Now, before I finish up this video, I do just want to say, I do now have a Discord server, and if you fancy joining that and yapping about video games and getting updates and behind the scenes stuff from me, the link is in my description below. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, and if you haven't already, why not subscribe? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
The one I'm floating right now is Badassatron, which is actually pronounced
Badassatron.